Aid for trade plays an important role in German development policy. Trade is a crucial element for development. Trade allows countries to make use of their comparative advantages. Trade can create jobs, boost the economy, and thus generate tax revenues. These revenues can be used for sustainable investments, for example, into the education and health system.
Well, trade is a major engine for economic growth, generation of employment, and therefore has a critical role to play in reducing poverty. I think that trade is also particularly important because it can help generate a structural transformation of the economy.
Trade can have a significant positive effect on the reduction of poverty, which is the main objective of development cooperation. However, more trade does not automatically lead to less poverty. Creating good framework conditions for a sustainable development is important.
I think there is a recognition that there is a need to have some regulation and to look at the impact on the society. Trade creates winners and losers, and therefore there is a need to take care of the losers even more so in poorer countries.
The idea of aid for trade is to maximize the positive effects of trade on poverty reduction. This means that countries make use of the opportunities of globalization while minimizing the risks that are associated with freer trade. Since the launch of the World Trade Organization's Doha Development Round in 2001, trade-related development policy has become increasingly important. In 2005, developed and developing countries, as well as many international organizations, launched the Aid for Trade initiative. Aid for Trade has now been included in the programs of all major donors and their partner countries. Aid for Trade includes the following 5 categories. First, trade policy and regulation. Developing countries use aid for trade measures in order to prepare for international negotiations, to substantiate their positions, and to validate them with the stakeholders in their own country. Subsequently, the countries are supported in implementing the results of the negotiations, for example, obligations through lawmaking or the development of product standards. Second, trade development. Aid for trade measures promote organizations, as well as rules and procedures, which make it easier for companies to be registered, to grow, and to import or export. In addition to government agencies, this involves other actors, such as business associations, chambers of commerce, and export promotion agencies. Third, economic infrastructure. This means the founding and construction and development of infrastructure, which is most relevant for trade. For example, roads, railways, ports, communication networks, and energy grids. Fourth, building productive capacity. Aid for trade measures support small and medium-sized enterprises in order to integrate their products and services into international supply chains. It is important that as much revenue as possible stays within the country, and thus local consumption and employment can be stimulated. Fifth, trade-related adjustment measures. This means temporary financial support. It compensates for the losses caused by reform processes, for example, through a reduction in customs revenue. Aid for trade in the narrow sense includes the first 2 categories, trade policy and regulation, as well as trade development. For example, the development of an enabling environment for companies to trade internationally. For this purpose, Germany has agreed to invest 220 million euros annually. In 2011, the BMZ launched an Aid for Trade strategy, which defines the objectives and priorities of Germany's trade-related development policy. German development cooperation already carries out a whole variety of trade-related projects around the world. In Mozambique, one of the world's least developed countries, the German development cooperation is active in the area of aid for trade. It cooperates with the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. In the field of trade policy and regulation, the cooperation is conducted in the context of the so-called Enhanced Integrated Framework. The EIF provides a platform in least developed countries to discuss barriers to trade, jointly develop solutions with the stakeholders, and to coordinate trade-related projects of all donors.
Neste caso concreto do quadro integrado reforçado é muito importante porque a Alemanha está neste momento a desempenhar o papel de doador facilitador. O quadro integrado reforçado é muito importante, primeiro porque vai congregar vários parceiros de Moçambique para fazer face às várias dificuldades e constrangimentos que existem. Então, fazendo a congregação dos vários parceiros, também temos a possibilidade, porque comércio é um assunto transversal, que não diz só respeito ao Ministério da Indústria e Comércio.
In the field of trade development, the establishment of one-stop shops was supported.
Os balcões de atendimento único servem para o registro das empresas, para o comércio, para a indústria e para as outras áreas. A cooperação alemã levou a cabo um estudo para identificar aquilo que são as preocupações, aquilo que é o funcionamento atual e o que é que devemos fazer para melhorar o funcionamento dos balcões de atendimento único. Dizer de que nós tivemos a revisão, a criação do licenciamento simplificado para dar oportunidade às micro e pequenas empresas de registarem as suas atividades.
Also in the field of trade development, trainings for the analysis of export markets are conducted jointly with IPEX.
Bem, o IPEX, como vê, a função principal na promoção é promover as pequenas e médias empresas. E sendo a função de promoção de pequenas e médias empresas, nós temos programas de capacitação. E um dos parceiros é a Cooperação Alemã, que tem apoiado nessa componente de capacitação dos pequenos e médios para atingir o mercado.
Like in Mozambique, aid for trade measures can have a significant influence on the development of a country. For example, through enabling companies to access new markets and sectors. This creates jobs, makes the national economy more attractive for investments, and more resistant in times of crisis. In many development cooperation projects, it is therefore important to include the trade aspects right from the beginning. For further questions, please contact Unit 415 at the BMCED and the GIDCED Trade Program.